A black girl was walking to see her father, who was an important police captain in the city. She had no idea that this normal day would turn into one she would never forget, all because of some mean firefighters who didn't know who she was. Jasmine was a sweet 13-year-old girl with beautiful curly hair who loved her father very much. Her dad, Ethan, was a well-known police captain who everyone in town respected. While other kids might find visiting their parents at work boring, Jasmine looked forward to it every time. To her, her father wasn't just a police officer. He was her hero. The walk from her school to the police station was short, one she had taken many times before. It was a lovely fall day, with warm sunshine and colorful leaves on the ground. Jasmine smiled as she walked, thinking about how happy her father would be to see her surprise visit after his long day at work. As she walked, she thought about all the good things her father did for people. He helped everyone, no matter who they were or what they looked like. He solved crimes, kept people safe, and always did what was right. I want to be like Dad when I grow up, she thought to herself, feeling proud. Then something caught her eye. A big red fire truck parked on the street. Near it stood a group of firefighters, laughing and talking loudly. At first, Jasmine didn't worry. After all, firefighters were supposed to be good people, just like police officers. But when she got closer, one of them saw her and nudged his friend. The way they looked at her made her feel uneasy. Jasmine tried to walk faster, hoping to pass by without any trouble. But then she heard a rough voice behind her. "Hey, little girl. Where are you running off to in such a hurry?" One of the firefighters called out, his voice not friendly at all. Jasmine stopped for a moment and looked back. She didn't want to be rude. Her father had taught her to respect people who serve the community. "I'm going to see my dad," she said softly, but loud enough for them to hear. "Your dad, huh?" another firefighter said with an unkind laugh. "Who's your dad that's so important you're in such a rush?" Jasmine felt proud of her father, so she stood up straight and said clearly, "My dad is Ethan, the police captain." She thought telling them might make them more respectful, but instead, the firefighters burst out laughing. Their laughter wasn't friendly. It was mean and mocking. As they laughed harder, Jasmine saw their friendly faces turn cold and cruel. One of them stepped closer to her, a nasty smile on his face. "Oh, so you're the police captain's daughter," he said, reaching for the water hose on the fire truck. "Let's see if the police captain's daughter can handle a little fun." Jasmine's heart started beating fast. She knew something bad was about to happen. "Please don't," she said quietly, backing away with her hands up to protect herself. But they didn't listen. The firefighter turned on the hose, sending a powerful blast of ice-cold water straight at her. The water hit her so hard she almost fell down. It was freezing cold, soaking through her clothes and making her shake. The firefighters roared with cruel laughter. "What's wrong? Scared of a little water?" they teased. "Aren't you supposed to be tough, being the police captain's daughter and all?" Jasmine stood there shivering as the freezing water kept hitting her. She looked around for help, but the street was empty. No one was there to help her. She tried not to cry, but tears started mixing with the water running down her face. "Please stop," she begged, her voice shaking. But this only made them laugh harder. "It's just water, kid. What's there to be afraid of?" One of them sneered, bending down to look at her with mean eyes. The water kept coming, and Jasmine felt smaller and weaker with each second. She had always been proud to be her father's daughter. She had always felt strong because of who he was. But now, as these men laughed at her and hurt her, she felt helpless and ashamed. The water was so cold it made her teeth chatter. Her clothes were completely soaked, her hair dripping, and her school books ruined. But worse than the cold was the hurt in her heart. These were people who were supposed to help others, just like her dad did. Instead, they were being cruel to her just because they could. When they finally turned off the water, Jasmine stood there, dripping and shaking. The lead firefighter looked down at her with a mean smile. "Next time, tell your dad to keep a better eye on you, kid," he said in a voice that made her feel awful. As they walked away laughing, Jasmine felt something break inside her. The pride she had always felt about her father, the safety she had always felt in her community. It all seemed to wash away with that cold water. She stood there alone on the sidewalk, water dripping from her clothes, her heart heavy with pain and shame. Why did they do this to her? Was it because she was black? Because she was her father's daughter? These questions spun in her mind, but she had no answers. Through her tears, Jasmine knew she had to be strong. She had to tell her father what happened. With her legs shaking and her clothes heavy with water, she started walking toward the police station. Each step was hard, but she kept going, holding on to the hope that her father would make things right. The wonderful day that had started with such happiness had turned into something terrible. But deep inside, even though she was hurt and scared, a small flame of hope still burned. Jasmine knew her father would not let this cruel act go unpunished. Justice would come, even if right now all she could feel was the cold and the pain of being treated so unfairly. Shivering and scared, Jasmine walked into the police station. Water dripped from her clothes onto the floor with every step she took. Some officers who knew her well walked past, then stopped and turned back with worried faces when they saw her state. "Jasmine? What happened to you?" one officer asked, his voice full of concern. But Jasmine couldn't speak. Her throat felt tight, and tears kept coming. She just wanted to see her father. The kind officer gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, let's get you to your dad," he said softly, leading her toward her father's office. Inside his office, Captain Ethan was busy with paperwork. When the door opened, he looked up, ready to handle another problem from his busy day. But when he saw Jasmine standing there, soaked, shaking and crying, he jumped to his feet, knocking his chair over. "Jasmine! Baby, what happened?" He rushed to her, his heart pounding with worry. Jasmine fell into his arms, finally letting out all the tears she had been holding back. Her father's warm hug made her feel safe at last. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Tell me what happened," Ethan said softly, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders while trying to calm his own anger at seeing his daughter like this. Through her tears, Jasmine told him everything. She told him about the firefighters, how they had mocked her, sprayed her with the freezing water, and laughed at her pain. With each word, her father's face grew darker with anger. "They did this because I'm your daughter, Dad," Jasmine said quietly. "They wanted to hurt me because of you." Ethan felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. His own child had been hurt because of who he was. The pride of being a police captain suddenly felt heavy on his shoulders. "Listen to me, Jasmine," he said, holding her face gently in his hands. "What they did was wrong, very wrong, and I promise you, they won't get away with it." He helped Jasmine into a chair and got her a warm blanket from the emergency kit he kept in his office. As he watched her shiver under the blanket, his anger grew stronger. But he knew he had to be smart about this. These weren't just any troublemakers. They were firefighters, people with power in the community. "Stay here, sweetheart," he said, calling in a trusted female officer. "Officer Sarah will stay with you while I make some calls." Ethan stepped out of his office, his mind racing. He had dealt with all kinds of criminals in his career, but this was different. This was personal. These men had deliberately hurt his daughter, trying to send him a message. He called his best friend and fellow officer Ryan to his office. When Ryan heard what happened, his face turned red with anger. "Those cowards," Ryan said, his fists clenched. "They picked on a child to get to you, Ethan. This isn't just wrong, it's evil." Ethan nodded, trying to stay calm, though his heart was burning with rage. "We need to handle this right, Ryan. They think they can get away with this because they're firefighters. But they forgot something important." "What's that?" Ryan asked. "They forgot that when you hurt a police captain's child, you don't just make one enemy. You make an enemy of the entire force," Ethan said, his voice firm and determined. Ryan put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "We're with you, Ethan. Every officer in this building will stand behind you and Jasmine. Those men need to learn they can't abuse their power like this." Ethan looked through his office window at Jasmine, who was now sipping hot chocolate that Officer Sarah had brought her. His little girl, who had always been so proud of him, had been hurt because of who he was. The thought made his heart ache. "I'm going to the fire station," Ethan said, standing up. "But I'm going to do this right. We're going to show them what real justice looks like." Ryan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Do you want backup?" "No," Ethan said. "I need to face them myself first. But have a team ready." Something tells me this isn't going to be as simple as a conversation. Before leaving, Ethan went back to Jasmine. She looked up at him with trust in her eyes, the same trust she'd always had. He wouldn't let that trust be broken. "I'll be back soon, sweetheart," he said, kissing her forehead. What those men did was wrong, and they're going to learn that actions have consequences. As Ethan walked out of the police station, he felt the weight of what he was about to do. He wasn't just walking into this as a father seeking justice for his daughter. He was walking into it as a police captain about to challenge other public servants who had abused their power. This wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth fighting for ever was. And for Jasmine, for justice, for what was right, he would face whatever came his way. With determination in each step, Ethan walked up to the fire station. His heart was pounding, but his face showed no fear. The same group of firefighters was still there, laughing and joking like they hadn't just terrorized an innocent child. When they saw him approach, their laughter died down. They recognized him right away. Everyone in town knew Captain Ethan. One tall firefighter, clearly their leader, stepped forward with a smirk on his face. "Well, look who it is," he said loudly. "Captain Ethan himself. What brings you to our station?" Ethan kept his voice steady, though anger burned inside him. "I think you know exactly why I'm here. My daughter Jasmine told me what you did to her." The firefighters exchanged looks and started laughing again. Their laughter was mean, just like when they had tormented Jasmine. "Oh, that!" one of them said. "Come on, Captain, it was just a bit of fun. Your daughter needs to toughen up. A little water never hurt anyone." Ethan's hands tightened into fists, but he kept them at his sides. "Fun? You call bullying a 13-year-old girl fun? You're supposed to protect people, not hurt them." The tall firefighter stepped closer, his face no longer showing any pretend friendliness. "Listen here, Captain. Around here, we do what we want. Your badge doesn't mean anything to us." "This isn't about my badge," Ethan said firmly. "This is about right and wrong. You hurt my child. You humiliated her. That's not going unpunished." Suddenly, the firefighters moved, surrounding Ethan in a tight circle. There were 5 of them and 1 of him. The tall one got right in his face. "And what are you going to do about it?" he sneered. "File a complaint? Go to the newspapers? Nobody cares, Captain. You're not as powerful as you think you are." Before Ethan could react, someone shoved him hard from behind. He stumbled forward, and another firefighter pushed him back. They were playing with him, just like they had played with Jasmine. Then the first punch came, hitting him in the face. Ethan tried to defend himself, but they attacked from all sides. Fists hit his body, kicks landed on his legs. He fell to the ground, but they didn't stop. "Not so tough now, are you, Captain?" One of them laughed, landing another kick. Through the pain, Ethan thought of Jasmine. He thought of how scared she must have been, facing these bullies alone. The thought gave him strength, and he managed to get back to his feet. But they knocked him down again. Blood dripped from his lip, and his whole body hurt. Yet he kept trying to stand up, refusing to stay down. "Remember this, Captain," the tall firefighter said, standing over him. "Next time, mind your own business, and keep your daughter away from here." They left him there, beaten and bruised. But they had made a big mistake. What they didn't know was that someone had recorded everything on their phone. A passerby had seen the whole thing and captured the firefighters attacking a police captain in broad daylight. Slowly, painfully, Ethan got to his feet. His body ached, but his spirit wasn't broken. If anything, their attack had made him more determined to get justice. He limped back to the police station, where Ryan was waiting outside. When Ryan saw Ethan's condition, his face turned white with shock. "My God, Ethan! What did they do to you?" Ryan rushed to help his friend. "Exactly what I expected them to do," Ethan said, wiping blood from his lip. "They showed their true colors. Now everyone will see what kind of men they really are." Inside the station, officers gathered around their captain. Their faces showed shock, then anger when they heard what happened. These firefighters hadn't just attacked their captain, they'd attacked one of their own. Jasmine, still waiting in her father's office, cried out when she saw him. "Daddy, what did they do to you?" Ethan hugged his daughter, ignoring his pain. It's okay, sweetheart. Sometimes standing up for what's right means taking a few hits. But we're not giving up. Ryan stepped forward, his face serious. The whole station is behind you, Ethan. Those men crossed a line. First they attack a child, then they attack a police captain. This ends now. Other officers nodded in agreement. This wasn't just about Ethan and Jasmine anymore. This was about justice, about right and wrong, about making sure power wasn't abused. What the firefighters didn't know was that their actions that day would start something much bigger than they could have imagined. Their cruelty toward a young girl and their attack on her father would soon shake the entire city. As Ethan sat in his office, holding an ice pack to his face, he looked at Jasmine and made a silent promise. This wasn't over. Justice would come, and it would come in a way those firefighters never expected. The sun was setting outside, marking the end of a day that had changed everything. But it was also the beginning of something powerful, a fight for justice that would unite an entire community. The video of Ethan's beating spread like wildfire through social media. People couldn't believe their eyes. Firefighters, who were supposed to protect the community, brutally attacking a police captain in broad daylight. But when the story of what they'd done to Jasmine came out, the public's anger turned to outrage. The next morning, Ethan's phone wouldn't stop ringing. The first call came from Mrs. Collins, an elderly neighbor who had watched Jasmine grow up. Ethan, her voice shook with emotion, I just saw the video. The whole neighborhood is talking about it. We're all behind you and Jasmine. We've started a petition to the city council. These men cannot get away with this. More calls followed, from parents whose children went to school with Jasmine, from community leaders, from people Ethan had helped over the years. Each one offered support. Each one demanded justice. At the police station, Ryan organized a meeting with all officers. The room was packed, with people standing against the walls. Every face showed determination. Look, Ryan said, standing at the front. Ethan isn't just our captain, he's our friend, a father who was protecting his daughter. What happened to him and Jasmine could happen to any of our families. We can't let this stand. The officers nodded in agreement. One by one they stood up, sharing ideas about how to help. Some offered to gather evidence, others volunteered to interview witnesses. The support was overwhelming. Meanwhile, at Jasmine's school, students and teachers rallied around her. When she walked into class that morning, her classmates gave her a standing ovation. Her math teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, hugged her tight. You're so brave, Jasmine, Mrs. Rodriguez said. Standing up to bullies is hard, but you and your father are showing everyone how to do it right. Outside the fire station, something unexpected was happening. A crowd had gathered, holding signs that read, Justice for Jasmine and Stop Abuse of Power. The group grew larger by the hour. Parents brought their children, elderly people brought chairs to sit in, but nobody left. They were making sure everyone knew what had happened. Local news reporters arrived, pointing cameras at the protesters. One reporter put her microphone in front of a grandmother holding a sign. Why are you here today? The reporter asked. Because what they did to that child was wrong, the grandmother said firmly. I've lived in this city for 60 years. These firefighters are supposed to protect us. Instead, they're bullying children and beating up good men like Captain Ethan. It's not right, and we won't be quiet about it. The story made the evening news. People watching at home were shocked and angry. Phone calls flooded the mayor's office and the city council. Everyone wanted the same thing, justice for Ethan and Jasmine. Back at home, Ethan and Jasmine sat watching the news coverage together. Jasmine held her father's hand tight. Dad, she said quietly, I can't believe all these people care about what happened to us. Ethan smiled, though it hurt his bruised face. That's because good people will always stand up against wrong, sweetheart. Remember that. We're not alone in this fight. Then came another surprise. A group of firefighters from a different station showed up at Ethan's house. Their captain, a man named James, looked ashamed. Captain Ethan, James said, we came to apologize. Those men don't represent what firefighters stand for. We're here to support you and Jasmine. What they did goes against everything we believe in. The support kept growing. Local businesses put up signs in their windows supporting Ethan and Jasmine. Children made cards at school and sent them to the police station. The local church organized a prayer meeting for justice. Even the city's human rights organizations got involved. They called for an investigation, demanding that the firefighters be held accountable not just for the assault, but for racial bias and abuse of power. The mayor couldn't ignore it anymore. With public pressure mounting, she called for an emergency city council meeting. The message was clear. Something had to be done. Through it all, Ethan and Jasmine grew stronger. Every message of support, every person standing up for them, helped heal their wounds. The pain was still there, but now they had hope. Hope that justice would be served. Hope that their community would become better because of this. As Ethan tucked Jasmine into bed that night, she smiled at him. "You know what, Dad?" she said. "Those firefighters thought they could scare us, but they just showed everyone how strong we really are." Ethan kissed her forehead, his heart swelling with pride. His daughter wasn't just a victim anymore. She was becoming a symbol of courage for the whole community. The fight wasn't over, but something important had changed. What started as a cruel act against a young girl had awakened something powerful. A community's sense of justice, a determination to stand up against wrongdoing, no matter who the wrongdoers were. The city council's emergency meeting was packed. People spilled out into the hallways, all wanting to hear what would be done about the firefighters. The mayor, facing pressure from all sides, announced a full investigation. "We will investigate every detail," she said firmly. "No stone will be left unturned. Our community deserves to know the truth, and those responsible must face the consequences of their actions." The investigation started right away. Police officers worked overtime, gathering evidence. They collected the viral video, security camera footage from nearby stores, and statements from witnesses. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of what happened. One brave store owner stepped forward with security footage showing Jasmine's original harassment. The video clearly showed the firefighters targeting her, spraying her with water, and laughing at her fear. When people saw this footage, their hearts broke for the young girl. "I kept quiet at first because I was scared," the store owner admitted. "But seeing how the whole community is standing up, I knew I had to do the right thing. No child should be treated that way." More witnesses came forward. A mail carrier who saw the attack on Ethan, a teacher who had seen Jasmine walking home soaking wet, crying. Each story added to the evidence against the firefighters. The investigation team discovered something else. Complaints against these same firefighters had been filed before, but they'd been buried or ignored. Other people, especially minorities, had faced similar bullying, but had been too afraid to speak up. An elderly black woman finally shared her story. "They blocked my car one day, made fun of me, said horrible things. I was too scared to report it. But seeing little Jasmine's courage, it's time these men are stopped." Meanwhile, Jasmine went back to school, holding her head high. Her story had changed how her classmates saw her. She wasn't just the police captain's daughter anymore. She was someone who stood up to bullies, who faced fear with courage. During a school assembly, Jasmine's principal asked her to speak. Though nervous, she stood at the microphone, her voice clear and strong. "Being bullied is scary," she told her schoolmates, "but staying quiet when bad things happen is even scarier. We all have the power to stand up for what's right." The investigation team worked day and night. They interviewed everyone involved, collected more videos, and built a strong case. The evidence was overwhelming. These weren't just a few isolated incidents. The firefighters had been abusing their power for years. When the investigation team presented their findings to the city council, the room fell silent. The proof was undeniable. Pictures of Jasmine's soaked clothes, medical reports of Ethan's injuries, witness statements, security videos, social media posts where the firefighters had bragged about their actions. The firefighters tried to defend themselves. They hired expensive lawyers who claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that they were just playing around, that they meant no harm. But their excuses fell flat against the mountain of evidence. The district attorney stood up during the final presentation. "This isn't just about one girl or one police captain," she said. "This is about abuse of power. This is about protecting our community from those who would use their position to hurt others." The city council voted unanimously to take the case to trial. The firefighters would face charges of assault, abuse of power, and civil rights violations. It would be a public trial. The community demanded nothing less. As news of the trial spread, Support for Ethan and Jasmine grew even stronger. People began sharing their own stories of standing up to bullies. Schools started programs about courage and justice. The whole city was learning from this father and daughter. Ethan's bruises were healing, but the determination in his eyes grew stronger each day. Every new piece of evidence, every witness who came forward, proved what he had known all along. Justice would prevail. One evening, as Ethan and Jasmine sat on their porch, a group of young firefighter trainees came to visit. Their leader, a young man named Marcus, spoke from his heart. "We're training to be firefighters because we want to help people," Marcus said. "What those men did goes against everything we believe in. We promise you, the next generation of firefighters will be different." Jasmine smiled at them, seeing the sincerity in their eyes. This was what real change looked like. Young people promising to be better, to do better. As the trial date approached, Ethan and Jasmine prepared themselves. They knew facing their attackers in court wouldn't be easy. But they also knew they weren't facing them alone. They had an entire community behind them, standing strong, demanding justice. "Are you ready for this?" Ethan asked Jasmine the night before the trial was set to begin. Jasmine took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready, Dad. Those men thought they could scare us into silence. But they didn't just hurt us. They hurt our whole community. It's time they learned that actions have consequences." The story had grown beyond a simple case of bullying. It had become a movement for change, a demand for justice, a testament to the power of standing up for what's right. Tomorrow, in court, that movement would face its biggest test. The courthouse was packed on the first day of the trial. People lined up outside before sunrise, wanting to show support for Ethan and Jasmine. Inside, every seat was filled, with people standing against the walls. The air felt heavy with hope and determination. Jasmine sat next to her father, wearing a simple blue dress her mother had once loved. Though her hands shook slightly, her head was held high. The firefighters sat on the other side, looking less confident than they had that day at the fire station. The prosecutor, Ms. Thompson, started by playing the videos, first of Jasmine being sprayed with water, then of Ethan being beaten. The sounds of cruel laughter and fists hitting flesh filled the silent courtroom. People gasped, some cried, others looked away. But Jasmine watched, her back straight, refusing to show fear. "What you've just seen," Ms. Thompson said, her voice firm, "is not a joke that went too far. It's not a misunderstanding. It's a deliberate abuse of power by men who were trusted to protect our community." The firefighter's lawyer tried to paint it differently. "My clients were just having some fun," he argued. "They never meant to cause real harm. They're dedicated public servants who made a mistake." But then the witnesses started coming forward. The store owner showed his security footage. The mail carrier described Ethan's beating. The elderly woman told her story of harassment. Each testimony built a clear picture of bullies who had gone unchecked for too long. Then came Jasmine's turn to testify. As she walked to the witness stand, her father squeezed her hand. The courtroom fell silent, everyone holding their breath. "Jasmine," Ms. Thompson asked gently, "can you tell us what happened that day?" Jasmine looked straight ahead, her voice clear and strong. "I was walking to see my dad at work, just like I always did. I saw the firefighters, but I wasn't scared at first. They're supposed to help people, like my dad does." She told the whole story, their cruel words, the freezing water, their laughter at her fear. Her voice shook sometimes, but she didn't cry. "The water was so cold it hurt," she said. "But what hurt more was how they laughed. They thought hurting me was funny. I kept thinking, these are people who are supposed to protect us. Why would they want to hurt me?" One of the firefighters hung his head, unable to look at her. Another shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But their leader just stared coldly, showing no remorse. The defense lawyer tried to shake her story. "Wasn't it just a hot day? Maybe they thought you'd enjoy cooling off." Jasmine looked him straight in the eye. "It was autumn. There were leaves on the ground. I was wearing a sweater. They didn't do it to help me. They did it to hurt me because of who my father is." Her honest words touched everyone in the courtroom. Even the judge wiped his eyes. Then something unexpected happened. The youngest firefighter, Tom, suddenly stood up. "Your Honor," he said, his voice shaking, "I need to tell the truth." His lawyer tried to stop him, But Tom shook his head. No, this has gone on too long. We need to be honest. Looking at Jasmine, then Ethan, tears filled his eyes. We did it on purpose. Our leader hated that a black man had so much respect as police captain. When we saw his daughter, he said it was a perfect chance to teach them a lesson. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't fun. It was cruel, and it was wrong. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The lead firefighter's face turned red with anger, but it was too late. The truth was out. I'm so sorry, Jasmine, Tom continued, his voice breaking. I'm sorry, Captain Ethan. I was a coward who went along with bullies instead of standing up for what's right. I don't deserve forgiveness, but you deserve to hear the truth. His confession changed everything. 2 other firefighters followed, admitting their guilt, expressing remorse. Only their leader and his closest friend remained defiant. When Ethan testified about his beating, he spoke not with anger, but with disappointment. As police officers and firefighters, we make a promise to protect our community, he said. We're supposed to be the ones people run to for help, not the ones they run from in fear. The evidence was clear, the testimony powerful, the truth undeniable. When the judge prepared to give his verdict, the courthouse fell silent again. Justice was about to be served. But this trial had become more than just about punishment. It had exposed hard truths about power, prejudice, and the importance of standing up for what's right. In that courtroom, a community had found its voice, and a young girl had shown everyone what real courage looks like. Have you ever seen a moment when justice finally comes? When right wins over wrong? That's what happened in the courtroom that day. The judge looked at everyone with serious eyes. The whole room was quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Even the birds outside seemed to stop singing, waiting to hear what would happen to the firefighters who had hurt Jasmine and her father. In all my years as a judge, he began, his voice firm, I've never seen such a clear case of abuse of power. Today, we're not just deciding about one incident. We're deciding what kind of community we want to be. Can you imagine how Jasmine felt, sitting there, holding her father's hand? After all the fear, all the pain, would justice finally come? The judge spoke again. To the firefighters who admitted their guilt and showed true remorse, the court recognizes your honesty. Your sentences will be lighter, but you must still face consequences. 2-year suspension from duty, mandatory community service, and sensitivity training. But what about the 2 firefighters who showed no remorse? The ones who stayed proud of their cruel actions? As for the leader and his main accomplice, the judge's voice grew stronger. Your actions show you are unfit to serve our community. You are hereby fired from the fire department, sentenced to 5 years in prison, and must pay damages to the family you hurt. The courtroom burst into applause. People hugged each other, some crying with joy. Why? Because good had won over evil, because bullies learned they couldn't get away with hurting innocent people. Remember Tom, the young firefighter who first told the truth? He walked over to Jasmine and Ethan, tears in his eyes. Can you ever forgive me? He asked softly. Do you know what Jasmine did? She looked at him and said something so wise it made everyone stop and think. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about giving people a chance to become better. Are you going to become better? Tom nodded, wiping his eyes. I promise. What we did was wrong. I want to spend my life making up for it. But the story wasn't over. You see, something bigger was happening. The whole city was learning important lessons. Want to know what they were? Schools started teaching children about standing up to bullies. Police and firefighters began working together to build trust with the community. People who had been afraid to speak up about being bullied found their courage. One day, a reporter asked Ethan, "What do you want people to learn from your story?" Ethan smiled, his arm around Jasmine. 3 things, he said. First, being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means doing what's right even when you are scared. Second, no one is too powerful to face justice. And third, when a community stands together, good will always win. The city changed after the trial. You could feel it in the air. People smiled more at each other. They looked out for their neighbors. They spoke up when they saw something wrong. Remember the protest signs that said "Justice for Jasmine"? They didn't go away. Instead, they changed to say, "Be like Jasmine, stand up for what's right." Isn't it amazing how one brave girl's story could change so many lives? In schools, teachers asked their students, "What would you do if you saw someone being bullied?" The children's answers showed they had learned from Jasmine's courage. But perhaps the biggest change was in the fire department itself. The new fire chief, a kind woman named Sarah, made sure every firefighter understood their real job, to protect and care for everyone in the community, no matter who they were. "What happened to Jasmine and Captain Ethan will never happen again," she promised. "Not on my watch. Want to know the most beautiful part?" Jasmine started visiting schools to tell her story, but she didn't just talk about the bad things that happened. She talked about hope, about standing up for what's right, about how one person's courage can change everything. "Being hurt is not your fault," she would tell the children. "Being bullied is not your fault. But staying silent when you see wrong things happening? That's a choice. We all have the power to speak up." Isn't it incredible how a story that started with cruelty ended up bringing so much good to the world? What do you think? Would you be as brave as Jasmine? Would you stand up for what's right, even when it's scary? These are the questions that changed a city, that made people think about who they wanted to be. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because sometimes the most powerful changes start with one person being brave enough to stand up and say, "This is wrong, and I won't be silent about it." 1 year later, on a sunny autumn day, Jasmine was walking the same street where everything had happened. But this time, things were very different. The fire station had new firefighters, good people who smiled and waved at her. Children played nearby without fear. The whole city felt warmer, safer, and kinder. "Look what you started," her father said, walking beside her. Ethan was right. Their story had changed so much. The old firefighters who had shown they were sorry were now teaching others about being kind and fair. They visited schools to talk about their mistakes and what they learned. Tom, who had told the truth in court, now ran special classes teaching firefighters and police officers how to serve everyone in the community fairly. He never forgot the lesson he learned from hurting Jasmine. The bad firefighters who went to jail? Their story was now used as an example of what happens when people abuse their power. Nobody wanted to be like them. But the best changes were in regular people. Kids stood up to bullies at school. People helped each other more. Nobody stayed quiet when they saw something wrong. The police and firefighters worked together to protect everyone. Jasmine had become someone special in the community. Children looked up to her. Parents thanked her. Teachers invited her to speak at schools. "Remember," she would tell people, "being brave isn't about being perfect. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared." One day, a little girl asked Jasmine, "Weren't you afraid to tell your story?" Jasmine smiled and said, "Yes, I was very afraid. But doing the right thing is more important than being afraid." And look what happened. The whole city became better because we didn't stay quiet. The mayor even made a special day called Stand Up for Justice Day. On this day, people remember that everyone deserves to be treated fairly and kindly. Now, here's what you can do to make your community better. 1. Speak up when you see something wrong. 2. Be kind to everyone, no matter who they are. 3. Help others who are scared to speak up. 4. Remember that one brave action can change everything. 5. Share this story with others. Remember, bad things happen when good people stay quiet. You have the power to make things better, just like Jasmine did.